is Notsam Wrestling.
Introducing your host from New York, here is Sam Roberts.
Joining us now, you know him from Say Less with Kaz. You know him from the MSG Network here in New York. You know him from the Masked Man Show, talking that wrestling. Ladies and gentlemen, back on Notsam Wrestling, Kaz.
Hey.
Here. What's going on, man? How are you?
I feel good, man. I feel good. I'm good. How about yourself? You look great, by the way. I know we talked about this off air, but the bald, it fits you. I like it.
I appreciate that. I feel like cosplay opportunities are an all-time high. You know, I can go Triple H, thin out the beard a little bit. I can go Saudi Arabia HBK. I feel like throw a bandana on. I can go full Nick Gage. Like, you know, there's a whole...
I was about to say, like, I think your Nick Gage has went up tenfold now. Like, you're definitely gonna get booked for that.
Bro, wait till Halloween and I shave the sides down and I'm full Stone Cold. Like, there's a lot.
It's a good look, man. I'm loving it.
Well, thank you, man.
I think for Halloween, I'm gonna be retro, not Sam. I'm gonna grow my hair out. Just like, since you're giving the gimmick up, I'm going to take it from you.
It's yours. You can have it. You're just sitting there insulting beloved wrestlers. So it's a very exciting time. WWE just announced they're going back on tour. I feel like, you know, this is the return. And I wanted to talk to some people about favorite moments that you have that the crowd really created. You know, those fan moments that have resonated the most with you. Do you have a favorite crowd-centered moment?
Absolutely, 1,000%. It was WrestleMania 35, KofiMania. I was front row. Like, obviously, it's I have a different sort of connection to this because I feel like I was kind of there for a good chunk of like the rev up to KofiMania, right?
Yeah.
And one of my biggest like regrets working there was that like I didn't get to like see that all the way through.
Yeah.
But one of the more fun parts was I got to enjoy it as a fan.
Yes.
So it was like I got to do the KofiMania stuff with Wale and Wale Mania, and you know the build up to that. I mean, I've been, you know, we've known each other for a long time. I've been to several concerts, several sporting events. The energy...
You've promoted them. You've been on stage for them.
Yes, I've been on stage for most of those things, right? Yeah. And the energy in the room, especially as time has gone on, the energy in the room when Kofi and the New Day came to Wale Mania unannounced, and you felt all that, like, just groundswell of love and just people just loving on Kofi. Like, mind you, like I put the show together. Booker T was the guest of honor. You know, the late great Shad and JTG were there also. So Shad comes in, and as Kofi comes on and, you know, kind of bum rushes the performance, you know, Shad puts him on his shoulders and just lets him just feel all that love that he was getting in that room. And if it would have stopped right there, I'd have been like, this is perfect. This is a fantastic night. Like, Kofi could get mauled on Sunday at WrestleMania, and it'd be like, it's okay because we gave him this moment. So we get to WrestleMania, I'm front row, I'm with Wale, and I'm like a few seats away from like Kofi's like family, like his wife and kids and everybody.
And like for those that don't know, I've sat behind his family, not at KofiMania obviously, but just at like a Royal Rumble that he was in, I think, the one in Philly maybe. And like his family is in it.
Yes.
In it.
Like his kids are 1,000% invested in the match, right? Yeah. So like I'm watching, you know, the kids and everything. And obviously like you think he's gonna win. Like I know the guy. Like we talk on a pretty regular basis. I'm assuming he's gonna win, but I don't know. Like I don't know. I don't really know. Like I've seen worse. I was just with Booker T. Like I thought that was gonna happen too. But like we all had that thing inside of us that we're just like, it's gotta be now. Like it's gotta be now. Especially as like a young black wrestling fan. Like that just meant so much. And from the entrance to the match itself to the aftermath, I've never seen a stadium that collectively just over, like grown men crying, like people just like hysterically happy that you don't see in regular wrestling shows. Like wrestling shows, like if something happens, the most you get is like a holy shit, look at each other. Can you believe that happened? Like that's a great wrestling night for you.
Yeah.
People were like hugging each other, like tearfully hugging each other. Like this was like Mandela was just freed. Like this was like you would think like something monumental had just happened, and it was monumental, man. Like it was. And it couldn't have happened to somebody that deserved it more, that would have gotten that specific reaction. Like, besides, like, take away all the accolades, take away everything you know about Kofi and the New Day and everything like that. Just Kofi himself, he's never been a bad guy. Like he was a bad guy for like a half a hiccup with the New Day, like for a
kind of, and it was really only because people were booing him. He wasn't even like a bad guy. It's just people didn't like it. Yeah,
like he wasn't like a textbook heel. Just like people just weren't really feeling the New Day,
right?
But he was always a good guy,
right?
So him getting that moment and just seeing the crowd erupt and show emotion and recognize the moment, like recognize how important this was for people like me who grew up loving this, people like obviously the New Day who grew up loving this, who would never get to see a moment like that in the WWE ring at WrestleMania for the WWE Championship. It just never ever happens, and it was so awesome. I'm getting goosebumps even talking about it. Like it's so awesome to be a part of history now, and obviously you felt it when it happened. But as like, you know, time is always the best judge. Like as we've gone away from that moment, you're just like, man, that was really, you know, with the pandemic and, you know, the Thunderdome and all these other things that have taken place. It's like, wow, like I can't believe like I really got to be here in this moment with all these people and feel this like historic thing. So it was definitely like jumps off the top of my list. There's plenty of other moments,
sure,
but like I've never felt 60,000 people collectively just overjoyed like that in my life. It was fantastic.
And it was also like, you know, you talk about like growing up a fan, like you're not, you know, that young black fans are not looking at Kofi Kingston going, oh, this is like a version of me if I was playing a stereotype, or oh, this is a version of me if I was acting how people think that I act. This is like, no, like that's me. Like that's my guy. Yeah.
Like he's the guy that you know, like, and that's what made it so satisfying. Like I'm like, dude, if I was a 5-year-old wrestling fan watching this for the first time, this completely alters the way I take this product in. I mean, I saw it as a grown man and I'm inspired. You know what I mean? Just seeing just everything, you know, shoot and kayfabe that he went through.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was real. Like it's a shoot, yeah, but he went through some real tribulations to get to that moment, and anybody can relate to that. You don't got to be a wrestling fan to be like, man, it's really dope to see somebody strive that hard for something and finally get it.
And it's really interesting, right? Because the build up, like prior to the gauntlet before Elimination Chamber, it wasn't even a thought that Kofi Kingston was going to main event WrestleMania. Like he wasn't even necessarily going to be on the show, right? And then you get there and you're right. Like it's to get that moment, for a moment that people generally thought like was going to happen. Like clearly the only way this story can go is for Kofi to win. That's the whole reason this exists.
Yes.
But you're right. The opposite side of that coin, it's one of those rare instances in wrestling where you're like, if Kofi doesn't win the title, I think I have to stop watching WWE forever.
Yes.
Like they can't do this to me again.
There was a strong part of me that I was like, listen, if the bad guys win this time, there's no point in continuing to watch it. There's absolutely no point. Like it was such the crowd, and I'm glad this is like a pretty much a tribute to, I guess, the fans, right? The fans returning.
Yeah.
The crowd, the real stars of the show, the WWE Universe, was forced their hand. This does not happen without you being a fan and making your voices heard and knowing this is what you wanted. It does not happen, point blank, period. So it was one of those things like, all right, if they don't pull the trigger here, I think I might have to go.
and how poetic is it too? That like the only other instance, or the one that people bring up when you go like, oh, times that the crowd forced their hand. Like the other time that gets paralleled to KofiMania is Yes-O-Mania, is the Yes movement, is Daniel Bryan, and the fact that, I mean, talk about an incredible performer. The fact that Daniel Bryan was able to pull off the most beloved, universally beloved WWE superstar, is able to pull off being that heel that is like, no, I'm going to ruin it for you.
The heel that we needed. Too,
yes.
Right? Like the heel that we needed. There was a small part of me that it doesn't, I know people will say that, but it doesn't necessarily hit the same if it's like Brock Lesnar he beats, right?
Right.
Like, as much as we love Brock as, you know, being who he is, Daniel Bryan and the brilliance that he brought to, you know, it could only be Daniel Bryan. Yeah. That's the beautiful thing about it. Like, it could only be him that he beat for the title, because he's the only person that can experience, or even in the smallest way, relate to that groundswell of support from the fans and being that iconic babyface where it's like, this dude overcomes all the odds. He's the super underdog. He's, you know, like, it's between him, Sami Zayn, and Bayley, three people I never thought I'd be able to boo, because you look at them and you're like, these are just fantastic baby faces. Why would anybody ever change anything about this?
Yeah.
And that's how you show how great of a performer Daniel Bryan is. And that's why that win from Kofi meant so much more, because that's a dude who is a first ballot Hall of Fame, not even WWE Hall of Fame. I'm just talking about like just wrestling in general.
Life. Like a Hall of Fame of life.
Yes. Like if there's an all-encompassing, like cool dude Hall of Fame, like Daniel Bryan finds himself in there somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that being in front row for that, and seeing, you know, Woods with tears in his eyes, and E with tears in his eyes, and, you know, they had that wonky wooden title for a while, and then he unveils the blinged out regular title, and the crowd erupts again.
And how
it was like,
how smart of the WWE, by the way, to know this is going to be a forever moment. We do not want him with the wooden, you know, recyclable WWE championship.
I would have went a step further and like burned it and really got like extra, like, you know, screw the earth, screw the environment. But it was. And from the culmination to the actual match itself to the aftermath with his kids and the title and his boys holding him on his shoulders and his wife, and I was spent after that match. I know Becky and Ronda and Charlotte had to finish that night out, but that's one of those moments where, you know, that was the main event, but that was the main event.
Yeah, that's
like you're emotionally just drained afterwards, and it was one of the greatest live experiences of any live experience I've ever had.
And I think you're right about, you know, history telling the story, and ultimately even, you know, 2 years removed, I guess. But when you think about WrestleMania 35, for me, that's the moment. And I'm glad you brought it up, Kaz. That's a real good one.
Great one, fun one.
Where can people follow you and get on board with everything you're doing?
Please follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Kazeem, Kazeem. You can check out my podcast, Say Less, on all streaming platforms and on youtube.com/Kazeem. And I talk to Graps on the Ringers Wrestling Podcast show, The Masked Man Show, with my good friend David Shoemaker. Check that out as well.
Love it. You're the best, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joining us now as we celebrate the fact that WWE is coming back to fans again is somebody that has seen a lot of these moments firsthand. If you go back on the WWE Network, you'll see his young, cherubic face at the beginning of his career, right at ringside, squatting down for many esteemed moment. But, of course, he's been a fan for his entire life. Ladies and gentlemen, back on Notsam Wrestling, Mike Mansury. What's going on, pal?
Hey, I think you hit it right on the nose. Cherubic is exactly right. I was a portly lad at the beginning of my WWE career, but had a great time and was very fortunate to witness a lot of epic moments, Sam, live with the WWE universe cheering it on.
Yeah, and like we've been talking about, the fans really do make all the difference, and it's one of the things that makes wrestling unique. Is there a moment for you that stands out as like, oh my God, what the crowd did here in this moment made history?
Yeah, absolutely. Right off the top of the old Cherubic Dome, I can go back to Money in the Bank, 2011,
Woo!
Chicago, the Allstate Arena.
Woo!
CM Punk versus John Cena for the WWE Championship. And Punk's contract expires at midnight, right? What's going to happen with CM Punk and his future with WWE? He said he's going to take the title and leave WWE with the WWE title in tow. It was awesome. And, from a fan perspective, it was awesome. From an inside perspective, there was a lot of questions in the air as the show was kind of getting nearer and nearer through the afternoon and going through rehearsals and stuff, because no one knew outside of the principal participants and the big bosses what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Everything was a big question mark. And the crowd was also kind of left hanging. And keep in mind, we're at the Allstate Arena, the old Rosemont Horizon. We're in CM Punk's backyard. So just an amazing formula for what was hands down the loudest crowd reaction that I ever got to witness live, and probably the most impactful because of the belief, Sam, right? Like, talk about being in CM Punk's hometown, the Chicago crowd and how they just loved their hometown guy. But everyone believed in Punk, which is what made that moment so special, right? And you go back a couple weeks with the pipe bomb promo and everything that he was doing to get to this point at Money in the Bank. To me, it was almost like the precursor. This is what paved the way for what would eventually become the Yes Movement and Daniel Bryan, in that you're actually finding the fans not only getting lost in the entertainment side, but really putting their hearts behind the belief in this person that they hold to be the centerpiece of the company at the time.
Yeah, and it's like John Cena represented, and all due respect to both performers, obviously, it's CM Punk and John Cena, for God's sake, but John Cena represented everything that WWE thought a top guy should be, and CM Punk represented everything that this segment of the fan base thought a top guy should be. And there was this kind of dichotomy going on at the time, this the thing that, like, two views that were complete opposites. And that section of the fan base was, we'd been convinced WWE just doesn't see it our way. We're not going to see a top guy look like what we think a top guy should be. It's going to be what they think a top guy should be. And as much as that sort of CM Punk model, you could see it reflected in Daniel Bryan, this John Cena model, you could see it reflected in Roman Reigns. And I think that's what put the brakes on him becoming a megastar early, because fans were so worried that we were getting another John Cena thing, another, thing that was not what we chose, that they were like, wait, no. And I remember too, like, you hit the nail on the head when you were like, we didn't know what was going to happen. Because I remember this is one of the rare times where the dirt sheets are reporting the same things that the television show is reporting. Like, it's all like the line between kayfabe and real life is completely, forget about blurred. It's obliterated. And I specifically remember watching on pay-per-view, right? And CM Punk comes out with his new t-shirt on, and it's the ringer tee with the fist on it that looks like the flag. And I go, oh, Punk is staying. He's got a new t-shirt.
Merch.
But then Punk turns around, and the back of the shirt has Chicago, Illinois, and the date on it. So I go, oh, no, that shirt's just for tonight. Is he not staying? Like, can they get away with him not winning the title? But would they ever have John Cena lose the title? Like, and I can't remember in 10 years another time where I have known, you knew something significant had to happen, and you had no idea what it was.
Oh, it's like it's Montreal, 14 years later. Montreal, you go into the same situation, right? Where the news had started to kind of leak out that Brett was leaving. Sean was the challenger going into the championship match with Brett, who was on the way out. And you kind of had a similar picture, except there wasn't that animosity and that legit rivalry between, John and Punk that existed between Brett and Sean. But there was that uncertainty because, look, Punk was he was not one to mince his words, and given the opportunities that he was given on TV, which me again being on the inside, I was so surprised at how honestly they were allowing him to speak. And Punk is somebody that I consider a friend. He helped to get my foot in the door at WWE. So hearing that, I knew like off the bat, like, all right, this isn't a work, if you will. Like they're honestly letting this guy express some frustrations, if not all of his frustrations, that have kind of led him to this point to where his contract is expiring and maybe he doesn't want to stick around WWE. Maybe there's more for him out there. There's something else for him to do. His stock had never been higher, in the wrestling business. So he could have easily gone away. He could have, worked the Ring of Honor where Punk had come from. So it was a pretty wild time, man. Just with all that uncertainty and all that, you were legitimately left hanging at the edge of your seat to see what was going to happen.
And the crowd sounded like your dog right now. I mean, they got excited. They couldn't
The crowd
believe.
did sound like my dog right about now.
They couldn't believe it was really happening. And yeah, I mean, what's really interesting about that match is literally from the entrances throughout until the very end. And I mean, you think about that match and the visual that you're left with, and it goes back to the crowd. It's CM Punk, and he's sitting on the wall, and he's holding the title, and the fans are all around him, and he's blowing a kiss and saying goodbye to Vince McMahon. And you're like, this is that's the story, right? That's the entire story.
Sam, even prior to, right, like in terms of just that Chicago crowd. So Chicago's always had a reputation as being one of the hottest crowds in all of just wrestling, right? Especially in that building, the Allstate Arena, for those that have never been in it. So it's got an old school curved wooden roof, which lend itself to just the acoustics and amplifying the madness of 15,000 people there in a sellout. So, you couldn't have asked for a better setting for this, obviously, given the story. How apropos that his last night at that point with the company was going to be in Chicago. But I remember during the video package, I was working ringside that day. So during the video package, I'm just kind of walking around doing a sweep of the ringside area. We just wanted to make sure everything was clear. There's a lot of shit going on that night. So the package is playing and the crowd is already starting with the CM Punk chants. You get towards the tail end of the package, and they just continue to grow and grow and grow. And if you remember watching back on the broadcast, when they come out of the video package, Allstate Arena is already fucking undone. They're completely just ready to rock and roll. And the moment that first note of Kill Switch Engage plays into the crowd, they just went berserk.
Yeah.
They went berserk. To quote Pat Patterson, they went knocked.
Yeah. I mean, and I felt like with every beat that match had, whether it was Vince McMahon or John Laurinaitis or John Cena not accepting the help, or every single beat, I feel like the crowd was on the exact same page, and the crowd was just there for that story. You can almost, like, if you were to just take out the commentary, and if you could be a blind man in that arena and just listen to the crowd and know exactly the story that was being told.
One of the few matches, Sam, that you can get away with pulling the commentary and you can just get lost in what was happening.
Yeah.
And you could feel like everyone else felt that night at the Allstate Arena. And they really did take you on a phenomenal story of peaks and valleys. And like you said, Laurinaitis offering his help. When Vince finally makes his way out there, you're like, holy shit. Like, what, as a fan, you're wondering what's going to happen. But you also know from a reality, based perspective, like, this guy's done tonight.
Right.
There's no way in hell they're going to let him walk out of here with the WWE Championship. It's his last night. It happened.
And
it happened. Like, he hits the GTS referee counts 3, and it was almost one of those things where you're like, wait, did the show just break? Is the show broken? What just happened?
Yeah, and it's good. It's cool that you brought up Montreal, because while you're right, maybe there wasn't, the fights between John Cena and CM Punk backstage that you heard about that made it so that people had to get kicked out of buildings and stuff like that. What Montreal did that changed wrestling forever was not only establish Mr. McMahon as a character, but it let everybody know that ultimately there are ways to maintain control of this product.
100%.
Right?
100%.
And because that was because that was a shoot. Unless you're Scott Hall, he thinks it was a work, but I think it was a shoot. Because that was real life. You were like, okay, there's always that little thing since 1997, November of 1997. There is, if you've been watching wrestling since then, there's always this little thing in the back of your head that goes, real life could change, and those two in the ring might not even know it.
Yeah. Completely out of their control, right? Because once you're in the ring and you're doing what you do, there's a whole system in place that can really, shift the direction of everything at the drop of a hat. And you would have no say in the matter, being one of the competitors out there. But they told a beautiful story. The fans were hooked from start to finish. I remember I was kneeling down in front of the barricade wall on the hard camera side at the beginning for Justin Roberts to do like the announcements and stuff.
Yeah.
And Punk's family were right behind me. And in the sea of people, and you could even hear them on the broadcast. Like, they were just so unbelievably fired up and ready to go. The crowd was just hot, Sam. And I think with just that perfect structure, for acoustics that All-State Arena is, hands down, I mean, louder than any WrestleMania that I got to experience, even WrestleMania 32 in Dallas. That night in Chicago was just unbelievable on so many different levels. And I think what was awesome was that, again, to say it again, like, not to be repetitive, but you have this amazing crowd reaction that is sustained through the night, paired with the emotion behind that reaction. Like, it was palpable. You can feel it. Like, even talking about it makes the hair on my arm stand up, because it really was just a very singular, special moment in the history of the business that, probably won't be replicated again, with that sort of realism coming into play with the product, but not in an overly negative way, in a way that leads to a compelling story, not something that can be sensationalized and, he said, she said, who did what to who down the road.
So is that the show, when you think about shows that made an impact on you specifically from the crowd and the energy that the crowd sent your way, is Money in the Bank 2011, is that the show?
It definitely is, because it's that, I feel like that, gave way to so many awesome similar reactions down the line, like the Yes Movement when Daniel Bryan hijacked Raw going into WrestleMania 30 in New Orleans. It was genuine. It was just genuine from the heart craziness, emotion. I think in terms of an overall show, the only thing that I could probably correlate to it, and selfishly, this has got a personal tone for me because I was such a part of it, was NXT Takeover Brooklyn, the very first NXT Takeover Brooklyn, the first arena show, NXT. Wow, what a night! Just a night where everyone was rallied behind this monumental occasion for a brand that really had a short this point and was still considered WWE's developmental brand. No one expected that SummerSlam weekend NXT was going to go in and sell at the Barclays Center.
Yeah.
Even internally, Sam, right? Like, initially when that show was put on sale, I want to say it was maybe 6,000 to 8,000 tickets were opened up initially because they weren't sure if they could fill it.
Right.
And as the demand increased, and it increased very quickly, our folks responsible for selling on the live event side, they just slowly peeled back the entire Barclays Center on the day of until, holy smokes, we sold it out.
Yeah.
NXT TakeOver Brooklyn sold out, and everyone's going to kind of get a chance to see on such a big level in a hot market like New York that, what the buzz was, because there was so much buzz around NXT at the time, because It was the counterculture to the WWE within the WWE. And it was just awesome, dude. From the beginning, I remember just before we went live, if you remember the start of that show, we had Triple H in the center of the ring.
Yes.
And he was cutting a promo to the camera.
Yes.
So Hunter beforehand was explaining to the audience what was going on, because we weren't going to feed his mic initially to the house.
Right.
It was meant to just be quiet, where you didn't know where he was. He was going to cut this promo, throw his arms up. We were going to light up the Barclays Center, and the people were going to go nuts. He does the explanation. Everyone's just kind of giving him shit, but you knew that the crowd was into it, because, you know, what always made NXT special was what made ECW special back in the day was the crowd. The crowd was just a bigger character in those shows as the talent were in the ring. So, you know, here we are in Brooklyn. These folks are going to get a taste of that Full Sail University crowd down in Orlando, but just amplified. They were excited to be part of the show. And when Hunter throws his hands up that night at the Barclays Center, the place was nuts. The electricity, which you always hear people say, again, it was something that was like tangible. You can almost like reach out and grab it. And it was, man, just an awesome special show. You kick it off with Breeze versus Liger in this awesome match. And all the way through the card, I mean, you had that memorable match with Bayley and Sasha Banks that tore the house down. And then you follow it up with Finn Balor and Kevin Owens in that ladder match that, you know, was just a holy shit from start to finish. Just an awesome night. And again, for me, a night that the reaction meant so much because it was genuine. There was so much emotion behind it, just more so than I like this guy or girl, or I hate this guy or girl, so I'm going to cheer and boo accordingly.
Yeah, I remember I was sitting in the audience for that show when Triple H came out and did that. And like when he actually started his thing, anybody that was talking, they'd be like, Triple H. Everybody around it, shut up. We're doing a thing. This is our thing. Yeah, it was such a loyalty that was packed in. Well, Mike Mansury, those are two great selections. I appreciate your contributions, man. Where can people follow along?
Hey, I appreciate you allowing me to contribute. Follow along on Twitter and Instagram at Mr_Mansury, at MR_MANSURY.
Thanks, man.
Hey, thank you.
Joining us now, you know him from the Insight podcast, as well as being one of the top wrestling interview YouTubers in the game, and just general wrestling YouTubers. I see him on KofiMania. I know this guy's going beyond just interview guys. Ladies and gentlemen, back on the show, Chris VanVliet. What's going on, my friend?
It's so good to see you. Thank you for having me back on, Sam.
Of course. Well, I had to make sure that you were embraced by Bald Sam, because you've gotten the rub from Hair Sam, but that guy's dead. So it's a Bald Sam world now, and I want to, you know.
You've officially killed Hair Sam?
He sucks, that guy. I'm not even he sucks. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah. No, Hair Sam was great.
He was a loser. He was a loser. Bald Sam is the future.
You are rocking this look, though. It's Stone Cold Sam Roberts over here.
Thank you. So, Chris, I know that you've got to be excited about wrestling fans coming back as being a major part of professional wrestling again. Are there any moments specifically for you when you think about wrestling crowds and what they add to shows and matches and moments? Is there anything that stands out for you as, yeah, this is where the crowd turned this into something historic?
Well, look, fans make every wrestling match that much better. Like, not having fans at a wrestling match are like not having people in the crowd for like a comedy show. So for me, it was my first ever WrestleMania that I went to, WrestleMania 18. I have the poster on my wall.
Yes, you
because
do.
I love this match so much. Rock versus Hogan. That's my ticket in the bottom corner there. It was only $135 to sit in the 16th row back in 2002.
Is that Canadian though?
That was Canadian, yeah.
So that's like $900 in the US, right?
No, it's the other way around.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's like $90 US.
Oh, not too bad. Not too bad. You get yourself a deal.
But that's a match that, sure, like I always say that's my favorite match of all time. And it's my favorite match of all time because of the crowd reaction there.
Yeah.
Like, was the in-ring wrestling really that great? It was fine, but that stare down at the start of the match. And Mike Chiodo told me that was not planned. But the fact that they stared each other down and the crowd's just going wild, that's the match. I mean, that match is incredible. That moment right there is it.
Isn't it great when you hear things like that from people like Mike Chioda? Because you would assume that somehow they just knew that reaction is what would happen. But the idea that both Hogan and The Rock are that level of performer and professionalism where they just both inherently understand. Because didn't they do the thing where they both kind of looked around?
Yes.
Like almost like it was completely choreographed, but they're just both operating on that other level where they know.
I have massive goosebumps just
Good.
thinking about this right now.
Good.
But the fact that Hogan went in as a heel, and as soon as he got in the ring, everybody turned and they were cheering for Hogan and booing The Rock. In fact, the first time I interviewed The Rock, I told him, Rock Hogan, WrestleMania 18, my favorite match of all time. He goes, "Oh yeah, who are you cheering for?" And I go, I was cheering for Hogan. And he goes, "Huh, me too."
Yeah, because The Rock, you forget, The Rock grew up in the business. So, as a kid, he's just as much in tune with Hulkamania as the rest of us. So I'm sure that he was feeling that as well. And what's so remarkable about that match is that The Rock does start, if you watch it, I think The Rock kind of adapts his style to start working a little more heel.
He had to.
Yes.
My favorite moment in that match is obviously Hogan is kind of leading the match at first. He's knocking The Rock down and he's getting these massive ovations, these massive pops every time he knocks The Rock down. And by the time it comes to the second or third knockdown, Hogan's surprised by this reaction. I mean, think about it. He's been a heel with the NWO at this point for years. This is the first time he's really getting cheered. And there's a moment where he flexes, does the Hogan flex, and he looks around and he's like, "Oh my gosh, they're cheering for me." And Hogan told me that he had to tell The Rock to slow down because, The Rock was working really fast and The Rock, not realizing what was really going on. He got him in the corner and told him slow down. And that's the match that we ended up seeing. But I challenge you to watch the first 3-4 minutes of that match and find a better crowd reaction anywhere in wrestling, because you will not find it.
I think you may be right. I mean, and it's really interesting too for Hogan, because he probably was legitimately surprised, not only because he had been Hollywood for as long as he'd been Hollywood, but before he turned over to Hollywood, and he had briefly gone back to red and yellow in WCW, but it wasn't it was nothing. Nobody cared. It didn't work at all. And when you think about right before he turned Hollywood, when he was the Hulkster in WCW, the reason he turned Hollywood was because people thought he was a cornball, because it was over. It was not getting those reactions. So the fact that it had been gone for so long, that it had actually made the full loop, and that it wasn't like people saw it as Hogan in 94, 95 that they were tired of. It was 85 all over again, is amazing.
And Hogan told me that because of that amazing crowd reaction, what we saw at the end of the match, it was not planned. I mean, Rock won the match.
Right.
And Hogan was told to stay in the ring. And Hogan told me, "Oh, that's weird. Why am I staying in the ring? I'm the one who lost the match." And Vince sent out Hall and Nash to beat up Hogan and turn on him. That was completely unplanned, all because of the amazing reaction in Toronto.
That's so cool. I love stories like that. And that's what makes this match unique, because when you think about the double turn, right? When you think about a babyface going heel, a heel going babyface, you think about the master class that Brett and Austin put on at WrestleMania 13, right? And just how this is maybe the ultimate wrestling match ever. But that was supposed to happen. That was the plan going in. The plan going in was, okay, Brett goes, they're probably mainly going to cheer me. They're probably mainly going to boo Austin. And then we're going to tell this story. They were in control. That's going to lead the audience to booing Brett and cheering Austin.
Yeah.
With Rock and Hogan, the crowd acted independently. The crowd decided, nope, we want Hogan, and we want him back in red and yellow, and we want our Hulkster back.
And this is the great thing about Canadian crowds in general, but specifically Toronto crowds and Montreal crowds, is they kind of just go to the beat of their own drum. And I love that here they leaned into it.
Yeah. Do you think that was encouraged by that 97 era, 97 era Bret Hart, that the idea that the WWE fully embraced that Bret will be a villain in the United States, but when he goes back to Canada, he'll be the ultimate hero. And we're going to lean into this fact that, the Canadian fans tend to go off script. We're going to fully lean into that. Do you think that kind of empowered the Canadian fans even more to go like, oh, if we're loud enough, like we can change the story. They're not gonna, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, if this is the late 90s, how can you not cheer Bret Hart?
Right.
If Bret Hart's in Canada. Like the man is like living and breathing and bleeding, the red and white for Canada. So like whatever he was doing on Raw on Mondays didn't matter when he came to Canada because he's waving the Canadian flag. Although I always thought it was strange that like the easy way to get heat in the US is just wave a flag of a different country.
Well, he also, I mean, he didn't just wave the flag of Canada. He also said that America was shaped like a toilet. I mean, like, when you're talking geometry, like, I'm not going to call him a liar, but it's not necessarily the comparison that I would make. But yeah, I sometimes think that maybe the Canadian fans at that point were like, oh, cool. So WWE's cool with this. We're going to go full force. And so when WrestleMania comes up, they're like, well, I don't care if you're telling me that that's Hollywood Hogan, the villain. The immortal Hulk Hogan is back in Toronto. I'm cheering for that guy.
Well, and think the last time that WrestleMania was in Toronto before WrestleMania 18 was when Hogan was in the red and yellows. So I bet you a lot of those people that filled Sky Dome for WrestleMania 18 were the same people who filled Sky Dome years before.
For 6.
And they were going, that's our guy. That's Hulk Hogan.
Yeah. We gave you Warrior. We're not giving you Rock. Well, I love it. I think that's an excellent pick. And when you're talking about fan moments, you would absolutely be able to argue that as number one. There's a couple other things you could sprinkle in there, but there's no way that that's not a solid debate.
And I think that that's the match that if you were to show someone a wrestling match and they've never watched wrestling before, they're obviously aware of who The Rock is. They're aware of who Hulk Hogan is. And you just tell them, The Rock is supposed to be the good guy here. Hulk Hogan is supposed to be the bad guy here. Then hit play. And the story is just told.
It is true. That's one of those very rare matches that you don't have to be a wrestling fan to get hit with that wave of emotion. Like the goosebumps that you were feeling, you don't have to be a wrestling fan to feel those goosebumps. You just inherently get it because you're right. And part of that is because The Rock and Hulk Hogan are the two biggest stars in the history of wrestling. So it's like you understand what you're watching.
Right.
So
with all of that said,
Yeah.
I am so pumped for fans to be back in arenas all across the country.
Yeah, let's get another Rock Hogan. Let's do it. Let's do it this year. Come on. All right, Chris. Great pick. I love it. Thank you for making the time. Where do you want to send everybody to get a taste of everything you're doing? I know that you're still pumping out the interviews like crazy. You get to sit down in a room with Nick Gage, which is amazing. I saw Chuck Palumbo just hit the YouTube channel. I love that, like, the you run the spectrum. It's like it goes from somebody who's super newsworthy and of the moment to like, oh yeah, I was wondering what happened to that guy.
Yeah. And thank you for the kind words. And next week I've got Xavier Woods on the show.
Yeah.
And Scorpio Sky on the show. And, I don't just interview wrestlers. I've also got Sean O'Malley, who's a UFC star. He's fighting on the same card as Conor McGregor, July 10th in Vegas. So wherever you're listening to this right now, you can find my podcast, Insight with Chris VanVliet. And on social media, it's just my name, at Chris VanVliet, VanVliet. Stone Cold Sam Roberts, thank you so much for having me on.
That's right, the Westchester Rattlesnake. Thank you, Chris VanVliet. You may or may not know our next guest is the face in the screen on Notsam Wrestling on the WWE Network, or Sam Roberts Now. You've been on Notsam Wrestling before, right? You were on the podcast before, right?
You got me out one time.
Okay.
Sam.
All right.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, the man behind the scenes at Notsam, Hot Dog, is here. Hot Dog.
Hello. Can I clap for myself?
Of course you can clap for yourself. Nobody else is going to. Speaking of clapping, I know you've got to be excited that fans are back there. I can't count the number of trips that we've been on where it's like you're there for work, but like the whole time you're like, yo, you think there's someone that could hook me up with tickets? Like there's actually a story. Which WrestleMania was it? Was it 30? It must have been 35, right?
Tell me the location. New Orleans.
Well, were you there in New Orleans? Yeah. It was 34. It's definitely 34 then. Yeah, because I brought you out to New Orleans, and we were trying to get you tickets, and our pal Joe Villa, who was working in PR at the time, just kept going around to the different department heads asking for tickets for Hot Dog, and he would never use your real name. And he was driving everybody crazy going, What are you talking about? Who is Hot Dog? What is a hot dog?
Well, it made me sound like I was a diva by the time I got there, because I didn't even pick up the tickets from Joe. I picked it up from like another person.
One of the guys,
like, Hot Dog.
Yeah, one of the guys that Joe had been bothering. But that's all to say for you. Being a part of these shows and being in the audience is a big deal. So you've got to be real excited that fans are coming back.
Yeah, as soon as I saw that tweet from WWE, I was like looking at the dates. I was like, okay, New York when?
Yeah.
When's it coming?
Yeah.
I gotta be there.
Are we flying to Texas? Just tell me. Tell me. So what for you, when you think about like moments that stick out as kind of fan created moments, what comes to mind for you?
Top of my head, there's a couple that stick out. Royal Rumbles are always amazing. When the crowd is really, really pulling for one person to win it, and they all go crazy. But but that could also moment,
that either builds somebody like Drew McIntyre, it makes him. Roman Reigns, like it takes him literally years to recover from.
Even with The Rock there.
Even with The Rock, The Rock
takes some years.
How great is that? Like the fans made it so that we have this moment of The Rock looking around like, what is this sound? What is this sound that I hear? I don't recognize it. What is that?
Are they saying boo? What?
Yeah. All of a sudden his hair started going curly and he started becoming Rocky Maivia again. Like what? No.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of like it when the crowd isn't, it really lets their voice be heard. But that takes me back to ECW's One Night Stand pay-per-views, 2005, 2006. I wasn't there for it, but I really, really, really wish I was. It's one of my favorite crowd interactions.
Is there one specific moment that you're like, yep, that's when it was the crowd?
Two.
Okay.
But yes, two moments.
All right.
Sandman's entrance in 2005.
Which, I mean, Bubba Dudley argued that that's literally the best single wrestling entrance ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and
when
you
he was
could
on the network show.
You could argue it. It's like the Undertaker is you're gonna find examples of specific Undertaker entrances that are gonna compete with it. But man, in terms of fan interaction, and it's interesting too because you can never really recreate it. I mean, you can find bootleg versions on YouTube, I think, but like on the network, because they don't have the rights to Enter Sandman by Metallica, like it's just not the same because the music's dubbed over. But you're right, that original Sandman coming out to Enter Sandman, walking all through the Hammerstein, like up in the balconies and everything, and everybody
people grabbing the cane and smacking themselves with it. It was amazing. He came all the way from the top. I didn't know Sandman at all, and I wasn't an ECW guy in the 90s. I was, I think, too young for it. So this was kind of like my first introduction to everything, and I was like, "Who's this guy? This is like I didn't hear about Sandman at all before this." And I was like, "I love this guy," and the crowd completely made me believe in.
That's so funny. But if you had been at that show, you would have been like, "Yeah, I've been watching this guy for years."
Yeah. I'll get my Sandman merch right after the match.
Absolutely. That's so funny though. That's actually even better. Like coming from that perspective, that the fan interaction in that entrance was so great that you, as somebody who was completely unfamiliar with the Sandman's work, like you were watching ECW One Night Stand for the WWE guys.
Right. Raw was going in. Carlito was going to be there. Yeah.
I'm here for Carlito. What are you guys here for?
Caribbean cool, baby.
And here comes the Sandman.
ECW ass. Yeah.
You're right. I had forgotten that people were hitting themselves with the cane. Yeah, it was awesome.
So good.
That was a good one.
So next year, it was Cena versus RVD. That entire match, that crowd. I don't know a crowd that's more pumped up than that one. And leading up to it, after seeing One Night Stand 2005, I'm like, this crowd might really fucking, do something if things don't go their way. It was such a great atmosphere.
It really is. When you think about, like, there are a small handful of signs. Like, you can think of super fans that you recognize them by face. Vladimir, obviously, Ringside Charlie, like guys like that. But there are only a few specific signs Like, use my sign, Tommy, was a big ECW thing where the sign said, use my sign, Tommy. And Tommy took it out of the crowd from somebody that was holding it up. And he hit somebody with the sign. And then he ripped off the poster board, and there was a stop sign
That's great.
buried in the poster board, which is great.
Yeah.
So there was that one. But I think, yeah, if Cena wins, We Riot might be the most famous sign. Like, you remember the font. You remember everything about that sign. It was so big. It was draped over the balcony. It's iconic.
And now it's used as the parody all the time for any time something happens that people don't like.
Yeah, and I mean, you remember how long it went on with Cena throwing his shirt and his hat and stuff out into the audience and everybody throwing it back?
And like Cena was getting a little bit of boos on Raw leading up to it. Because I remember WrestleMania against Triple H, he wasn't like the favorite, but like this cemented him. Like, the hardcore fans do not like you. This is our guy. The visual of him coming down to the ring with like his head down and like holding the title and just walking to the ring, so badass.
And everybody on top of him, like the entranceway was so narrow. Everybody's like on top of him, and he's just pushing through. And you're like, yeah, it was like the first time. Like it felt like the territory days. Like you were like, I worry about this guy's safety. Like, this guy's gonna need an escort leaving the Hammerstein tonight if he wins.
Oh my God, they're gonna kill him.
Yeah, yeah. And then the fact that the audience was so into that match, and I mean. It's a very indie thing, I think. You don't hear it that often in WWE. Maybe you will when fans come back. I don't know. But the whole, like, exchange of strikes, like the striking exchange, where you cheer for one and you boo the other.
Right.
Yeah! Boo! Yeah! And it was probably more so for that match than I've ever seen. Just, like, everyone in the building. And the Hammerstein only seats, like, 3,000 people, I think. But it sounded like 100,000 people. Just everybody at the top of their lungs. Every time Van Dam landed a strike, it was, yeah! And every time Cena landed anything, it was, boo! You suck!
I remember all the little moments from that. Like, I remember, like, it was going back and forth. Yeah! Boo! Yeah! And then, like, you know, I think Rob Van Dam Cena threw 2 back-to-back, so you just hear the crowd going, yeah, boo!
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, that was a very ECW thing, too, where they'd get on a roll where they'd go like, yeah, boo, and then the guy that they liked would start hitting him with a series of strikes, and the spot would be like, it would go, yeah, boo, and then the guy that people like would go for a series of strikes, and then wind up for one big strike, so he'd go, yeah, boo, yeah, oh, yeah.
So I honestly, if someone came up to me and was like, which show would you rather go to, like WrestleMania 17 or any of these classics or One Night Stand? Easy. I'd go to One Night Stand.
Yeah.
That's how much I love that crowd.
I think that's a good call, man. I love that that's the reference. Yeah, because it really was. Everybody was just on board with everything. And it's one of those moments where the match went with the crowd, right? Like, Rob Van Dam winning the WWE Championship was not only unlikely going into that match, it was like unheard of. It was like an absurd proposition that Rob Van Dam would win. But then you were also like, but how do they make Rob Van Dam lose in front of this crowd? And so when Rob Van Dam actually won the WWE Championship in the Hammerstein, and keep in mind, Rob Van Dam never won the ECW Championship. Rob Van Dam was the ECW television champion, but he never held the world title. So it's like all these fans that were all holdovers from the original ECW got to see Rob Van Dam, and it was just in that moment, because it wasn't that long after that he got the drug charge, and he was stripped of the title. And he wasn't stripped of the title; he had to JOB out for the title. But in that moment, it was like the culmination of everything from everybody that had loved Rob Van Dam, everybody that had loved ECW. It was like, here are your flowers. You earned them.
Right. They didn't announce him as WWE champion that night. They announced him as the new ECW champion.
That's great.
When he won the
And that was so. And then it wasn't that night. I don't think. I think it was like a couple weeks later when he would walk around with the WWE championship and the ECW championship. And I think he was the one that went, look, this one spins.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, Hot Dog, that's some great insight. That's a great addition. I love that because it really was, man, all these, it's going to make me want to go back and watch ECW One Night Stand. But is there anything, I mean, I guess I was going to ask, I'm asking everybody if they want to plug stuff, but you should probably just plug all my stuff, right?
I'll plug follow Not Sam on Twitter and Instagram and subscribe to the podcast.
All right, there you go. Yeah, if you're listening to this, subscribe to it.
Yeah.
You're plugging the podcast that you're on. Thank you, Hot Dog. Joining us now, one of the great trusted brains in professional wrestling analysis. He's the host of Busted Open on SiriusXM, which is also a tremendous wrestling podcast for those of you that are too cheap to get a SiriusXM subscription. Ladies and gentlemen, David LaGreca. What's going on, LaGreca?
How are you? First of all, you're describing all my family and friends when you say too cheap to get SiriusXM and just get the podcast. So
yeah. That's when the podcast comes out. They go, so I don't have to get Sirius anymore? And well, that's not really the point. It's more, I mean, I guess if you want to phrase it that way.
Well, no, my mom, before the podcast came out, my mom would call me at, 10 o'clock in the morning. And I'd be like, I'm on the air, Mom. And she'd be like, well, I thought your show was at 2. I said, yeah, it was 3 years ago.
Right.
Thanks for listening to the show. She didn't want to tell me she was too cheap to get SiriusXM. So she said, she just lied and told me she listened to the show every day. But obviously, when you don't know the time of the show, you're probably not listening to the show.
I thought it was only on Wednesdays. No, Mom, that was a long, long time ago. So, Dave, we got the news. WWE is going back on tour. This big 25 cities that are going to get introduced, which I'm sure will lead to 25 more and 25 more and 25 more. We're back, I feel like. Do you have a favorite crowd moment in your history as a wrestling fan?
I do, and it's going to surprise you. I have a couple, but one in particular that I thought was beyond the loudest. And people don't really talk about this moment like I feel like it should be talked about. And it happened in New Jersey because, as you know, Sam, big Jersey guy, grew up watching wrestling at the Meadowlands. And this was right after the night after WrestleMania 29 that was at MetLife Stadium. Monday Night Raw, Izod Center, which used to be called the Continental Airlines Arena, which used to be called the Meadowlands Arena, which used to be called the Brendan Byrne Arena.
Wow.
And that is when Dolph Ziggler won the World Heavyweight Championship. To cash in, the place goes nuts. The fans are on their feet for that entire match. And the moment that he won that title over Alberto Del Rio, I swear it was the loudest pop I had ever heard in that arena. And that's telling you something.
Yeah, I love that one because that's also like it brings you back to the original excitement of the Money in the Bank, which is why I don't think big stars should win the briefcase, generally speaking. And I also think way too often now people lose when they cash in the briefcase because people were on their feet for the entire match because it was like, oh my God, Dolph Ziggler's winning the title tonight.
Yes. Like, and don't forget at that time he was a heel and Alberto Del Rio was the face.
Right.
And that I felt like that night was like the beginning of the whole, night after WrestleMania crowd hijacking the show type of feel. I felt like it started that night after WrestleMania 29.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because with those moments, like you don't know, did the crowd just put Dolph Ziggler on another plateau? Did the crowd just create something that's going to turn Dolph Ziggler into the next phase of his career? Or is it just a moment? Is it just this singular moment in time that you'll remember? And I guess, people don't really talk about that moment. People talk about that moment in terms of great, like, cash-ins, but just in terms of great reactions. People don't talk about that, but I guess being there, you're never going to forget it.
And I think, too, Sam, the big reason why is because of what you just said. It didn't catapult into this huge stardom for Dolph Ziggler. I mean, Dolph Ziggler's consistently good, but I really felt that night was like, all right, this guy is now one of the top guys in the company. And that just didn't happen. And I feel like I thought that was going to be one of many amazing moments for Dolph Ziggler, but I think even if you asked him, that was almost like his career defining moment. And I don't know if he'll ever reach that height again.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was like the highlight reel becomes just that one moment on repeat. Like because it kind of does. Like when the crowd reacts like that, it tells the whole story. The crowd reacts like that because this isn't like he hasn't had opportunities to be the champion because people have been hungry to see it, but didn't think that we would ever quite get there. Yeah. Like it all of his hard work, everything, like the entire story of his career up until that point gets told within the match and by the reaction that the result of the match gets.
And Big E and AJ Lee were outside the ring. They were with Dolph Ziggler at that time. And I just remember the camera showed AJ Lee and she looked nervous. Like her hands were like she was shaking her hands and she was blinking. And like I felt like everybody in the crowd was just like AJ Lee. Like everybody wanted to see Dolph Ziggler win that title. And like they're like, is it going to happen? Could this possibly happen? Is Dolph Ziggler? And the place just I'm telling you, I've been to that arena so many times for wrestling, for concerts, for Devils games, Nets games. I never heard a reaction like I did that night after WrestleMania 29.
I mean, that goes to show why like crowds are so important specifically in professional wrestling because of what you just said. Like magic moments happen in sports all the time, but ultimately the crowd is there to witness those magic moments. The crowd isn't there to create those magic moments. And if you see Dolph Ziggler cash in the Thunderdome, it's cool, but it's not.
It's not. And Sam, like, I don't think, and I think we had this discussion the last time we talked about when it came to WrestleMania 36. I don't know if I'll ever go back and watch any of these matches or shows during this Thunderdome period. Like, I thought they did a great job and it looks cool, but without that fan interaction, like, and they did the best they could to kind of reenact the fan reaction. It's just not the same. The crowd is more than any other form of entertainment, more than any other sport. You need the crowd for pro wrestling.
What was the music Dolph was using at the time? Was that I Am Perfection?
No, I think it was I'm Here to Show the World.
Right. Because I got to imagine. I mean, I haven't watched that cash-in so long. I'm probably going to go watch that cash-in like as soon as this conversation's done. But like as soon as I'm Here to Show the World kicked in, that must have been when people stood up like, oh my God, and then just did not, like, you hold your breath when the music hits, and somehow you spend like the next 7 minutes with your breath held because you're like, is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? Like that's the beauty of a moment like that.
And especially at that point in my career, like, you know, Sam Roberts back the night after WrestleMania 29 was sitting at ringside, people coming up to you with drinks and food. That's Mr. Roberts, are you hungry? Are you thirsty?
That's when I was over. That's before I've been buried since then, but I was over back then.
If you needed to use the bathroom, they come and they put you in the back, like your own bathroom. Like I was in the last row of the arena that night with my daughter, like the last row of the arena. And I was like, the whole night, I'm like, I can't even see what's going on. You know? But in that moment, it's like I was put there for a reason. I was able to really feel that moment more than any other one because I was actually looking down at the crowd when that moment happened. So to just see that wave of people stand and the place go nuts, it was just a very surreal moment for me.
And think about how far that you've come. Now you're in the front row of the 300 section.
Yeah,
so
that's
huge.
I'm front row 302. Yeah, I'm like,
that's big.
You know, I've gone from row 24 to row 1 of 302. So yeah, thank you for acknowledging that.
It's big. It's big. To watch your growth has been incredible. And of course, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say maybe after that last rant I had, I might not even be able to get in the building.
Oh yeah, no. You don't like zombies, huh, LaGreca? Oh, you don't like zombies. Well, we won't make you suffer through them again. Oh no. We won't put you through that, buddy. We won't put you through. Yeah, this next live event tour, this is the Dave LaGreca is buying his tickets tour. Well, Dave, you're the best. I love talking to you about this stuff. Everybody can check out Busted Open every morning on SiriusXM. A morning show devoted strictly to wrestling. Monday through Saturday. Not even Monday through Friday, Monday through Saturday, with Tommy Dreamer and the world's strongest man, Mark Henry, and Bully Ray. And then, of course, every week you can catch that Busted Open podcast as well. It's always a pleasure, Dave. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, Sam. Love you, buddy. Thanks.
As the fans are starting to get ready to pour back into arenas again to watch WWE, it's a very exciting time. So who better to talk about this with than one of the great WWE fans that I know? You can see him on the kickoff shows on Peacock. You can see him or hear him, I guess, and see him on the YouTubes on Hot 97 every morning, the Michael K Show every afternoon, which, by the way, look what showed up. Look what I got. I got the K-Sters book. Came to my house today. I guess he's doing my radio. I guess he's doing my radio show. I don't know.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. You got it before me, dude. I pre-ordered it.
Yeah, I didn't even know he had a book, and it came to my house today. So
yeah, and actually, it's a good idea. We should actually just steal it. It's just all the interviews.
Yeah. I feel like you and I could definitely each do just a wrestling book based on the wrestling interviews that we've done throughout our decade and a half doing this.
Well, you said it, Sam, not me.
Yeah.
We have, some would say that we were really the first people out there doing things like this on the internet. Some would say.
We're the OGs of the game, some would say.
Some would say.
Some would say. Some would say. So, Peter Rosenberg, when I talk about moments that have been not just amplified by fans, but created by the audience that was in the building on that given night, what is one of those big moments for you that comes to mind?
Well, when you frame it like that, making it like really like the fans are the moment.
Yes.
I would say the one that stands out to me immediately, it's still a big match, and I'm sure others mentioned it to you, but it's Rock Hogan at WrestleMania 18 in Toronto. Because don't get me wrong, obviously the Rock and Hulk Hogan in and of itself is a huge deal for a variety of reasons. But when you really rewatch the story, there's not a ton there story-wise. It's kind of like NWO shows up, runs into the Rock. It's there's a Rock beatdown. Let's do this.
Yes.
They jumped right to it. And so while obviously the characters are so important, it's not story-based. It's sheerly based on how much the crowd wanted it. And the crowd was their own story in that match because they turned on themselves multiple times throughout the match. The match starts and it's all what was the order? Starts out cheering Hogan, booing Rock.
Right.
And by the time we get to the end, and of course Rock and Hogan deserve credit for this as well, but by the time we get to the end, in the last couple of minutes of the match, Hogan kicks out, they go nuts. But then when The Rock finally wins it, they go nuts again. It was one of those moments that if you were to have The Rock and Hulk Hogan in the Performance Center or in the Thunderdome or in anywhere where there weren't a dome full of people, it just would never have been the same match.
It's really interesting because you wonder what those things trigger, like what those moments really trigger. Like as we're talking, I'm thinking about how far back this really goes. And I go back to like 96, for example, because it's specific cities, right? Like you think about Roman Reigns at the Royal Rumble, Philadelphia. Philadelphia being the component is so important. Chicago's one of those cities, but New York is one of those cities too. And when you go to 96 and you go to Survivor Series, and that's November of 96, Shawn Michaels had won the title in March of that year at WrestleMania 12. And I mean, so much work had been put in to the boyhood dream has finally come true. But leave it to the fans in New York City to show up as Psycho Sid fans. Because if you watch that back, it's like Shawn starts to completely break character and starts cursing out the fans because he's so mad that everybody's booing him.
Yeah. And that's the thing. this is why the fans coming back are so important. And there are people who are like, oh, well, fans shouldn't dictate storyline. Of course they should. Of course they should. It doesn't mean that you follow every whim that the fans have, but that's what the whole thing is for. I think sometimes we get caught up. Fans have a tendency to get caught up on wins and losses. Mm-hmm. And we don't always conceptualize, no matter how much we think we do. We think that the person winning, say exception, like it's their first ever title, there's some really big significant thing. But if it's a regular title change or a regular match, screw a title. We think, no matter how much we think we're smart to the business, we think that the guy or girl on top is happier at the end of the night than the one looking at the lights.
Right.
We can't get that out of our head.
Right.
We don't realize that the only thing that matters to them is what the crowd does.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
If you're the one looking at the lights when you hear 3 and the crowd erupts, it doesn't matter which side you're on. You did the job.
Yes.
Yes. And so it's essential having people back, because for the performers, as much as they can try to tell stories and put on a match, they don't get the payoff in the end.
Right.
That's the payoff.
Right. And you also, realize too that sometimes the power is literally put into the audience's hands, and you wonder if it's almost knowingly put into the audience's hands. Like you think about AJ Styles and Chris Jericho both had very similar WWE debuts, and you wonder, in the sense that like this unfamiliar music is playing and the name is on the screen first. And it's like, here's your make or break. Are they going to react to seeing the name? Countdown to the Millennium was hyped up in August of 99. And Jericho flashes across the screen. And thank God for Jericho, people lose their mind, because they could have just as easily been like, oh, I thought it'd be somebody else. When Phenomenal flashed across the screen at the Royal Rumble that year. Thank God for AJ Styles that the crowd reacted the way that they did. And you wonder in moments like that if WWE knowingly goes, let's see. Let's see. Night 1, if you're this big of a star, if you're as big a star as you think that you are, this should not be an issue for you.
And it's funny, the AJ is one that I was really proven wrong on. Mm-hmm. I thought that based on the location of that Royal Rumble, we got a biased crowd, a crowd that was ultra familiar with AJ. And in reality, they were really just showing what the whole WWE universe felt, which is that everyone was excited about AJ Styles. One that I think about too a lot, and this is another Hogan one, and this is again not just the crowd, but to me, when I think of the memory, the crowd is so important. Hogan Andre. But when you think of the garbage raining down on Andre and Heenan, and them trying to cover up, and if you go back and watch it now, not a full second passes without crumpled up paper, a can, a cup. The garbage just rains down. And that hatred that the crowd felt for Andre is truly, it's so impactful to that story.
Yeah.
It's a huge piece of the whole thing.
How about this one that I think never gets brought up? How about, because people almost take it for granted now, like he never left. But he really did leave, and he really did seem like he wasn't coming back. But the night on Raw, when they just announced there's going to be the Humanitarian of the Year award, or whatever the award was, and Stephanie McMahon comes out to accept it, and everybody's watching going like, what the hell is this? And Here Comes the Money plays for the first time. I mean, the place came unglued. You could play that clip of Shane McMahon's first return just based on the first lyrics of the theme song. You could play that for anybody, and it would translate to exactly what was going on.
And again, what is that moment without an audience there?
Yes.
A reemergence of a character. Oh, wow, Shane is here. I can't believe it. It's the response that makes it that. That one of comebacks over the last decade or two, that one is high on my list. You know, we were both there. The Cena return at the Royal Rumble at the Garden. Everyone expected it was great.
You know
why?
So great. You know why that's so great? Because that was when Cena was getting booed, right? And that was New York. So New Yorkers, they would boo John Cena. But it was so unexpected that if you listen to it, you can hear, like, when the buzzer goes off and his music comes out and he, stands out there in the aisleway, everybody cheers. And then there's like this snap where everybody remembers they're supposed to be booing and they start booing him. But you always go back and you go, no, you can't hide how excited you were. I know you're supposed to boo him, but yeah.
What about, and this is, I don't know if it'll make it to the episode, but in the Warrior doc, I talked about this. The crowd at SummerSlam when Warrior beat Honky Tonk Man for the IC title.
Yes.
Because remember, that's an unnamed opponent.
Yes, unnamed opponent. Honky had the title for over a year, and those quick title changes didn't happen at that era.
But here's the thing. Warrior was so over at that point that the second his music hit,
yes,
the entire crowd knows not only is he here, hand him the title.
Yeah.
He just won. The music meant he won the title.
Yeah. So, as soon as the music played, you were like, title or no title, he's here to run over the Honky Tonk Man.
If he's there, that means we have a new champion. These moments are all just, they're made so much better. And, I was at WrestleMania this year, and I don't know how it translated on TV. There are not a lot of people there.
Yeah.
And it was loud in the building. Really, during the Bad Bunny match,
yeah,
it really felt like listen, did it feel the highest levels of a packed stadium? No. But during that match and during the big moments of the main event on night 2, the triple threat, even just having the 25,000 that were there, oh my God, what a difference it makes.
And I thought that WrestleMania was such a good little experiment for what we can expect with fans coming back, because I felt like night 1, the fans were specifically more cooperative than night 2. Like they gave them one night, because you want to know, how long does the honeymoon period last? One day, one night. It's like, we'll cheer all the good guys and boo all the bad guys on the first night, but you give us some nonsense on the second night, and we're gonna throw it out of the building.
Right. Oh, it's so true. And also remember, night 1 was hard because the crowd was in such a frenzy. The rain was crazy night 1. They started, and then after the big intro from Vince McMahon, rain delay.
Yeah.
So now everyone has to leave their seats again, and then they had to start over again. And so you're right, yet they were in that much of a frenzy that it lasted a lot. But night 2, they're like, all right, this is our second night in a row. Give us something good. And honestly, that's what makes wrestling fans great, because unlike, other sports, no one's there to root for one team.
Right.
Everyone's there for the overall show.
Right. And they will.
It's totally different.
And I feel like a game, baseball, basketball, football, like a game would have to be really, really bad for the whole crowd to just boo the game out of the building.
Right.
But wrestling fans will, they'll go. WrestleMania has had main events where the fans have decided to boo the main event out of the building before a hold has been put on.
Now, and listen, there are people out there like my co-host SGG who would probably say, well, that's why I don't love the fans. But to me, it's like, that's every blue moon. And you know what? Whether or not the fans are right for doing it,
yeah,
you have to own the fact that the match that you decided to book did that.
Yes.
So that doesn't mean that the fans are necessarily right, but to some degree, if it's happening from 70,000 fans and they paid their money, they kind of are right.
Yeah. Well, you can hear Peter Rosenberg on the Cheap Heat podcast with the aforementioned stat guy Greg, most of whose takes I agree with. But when he came out and said that he would like to save the Thunderdome forever, I wanted to rethink every take that I had ever agreed with him on.
That's why I call him Stephen A. Greg, because his takes sometimes are insane.
Well,
thank you, Sam. Appreciate
Peter,
you.
You're always good. Thank you, Peter Rosenberg.
Later, buddy.
Later.